Hey everybody, Meteorologist Josh Knight here with Samantha McCollum behind there on the phone, so she'll be able to read your comments and help us out along the way. Probably switch back and forth a little bit today. To give you a little bit of a preview, we're going to be talking about rain, making a few different things, have some fun experiments to show you, but at the end, we are ultimately going to make a rain gauge. And you can do this with a 2-liter bottle at home, or really any sort of bottle, any sort of cylinder shape makes it even easier to kind of measure the rain. And if you live in South Carolina, or really, it seems like anywhere along the East Coast today, you are likely dealing with rain either right now, or you're going to see some tonight into Thursday. So this is a perfect time to make your rain gauge. So let's talk about a few things first. Wanted to start off, again, today is all about rain. Actually made it at 1 o'clock today too, so pretty happy about that. Let me start off with your cloud formation. So we're going to make a cloud in a bottle again because they're related really closely. In order to get clouds, we have to already have water floating around in the air. That's happening right now in this room. It's happening in your house. It's outside. It's called water vapor. It's water in its gas form that we can't see. Uh-oh, what's that?
My mom's here.
Good. Samantha, will you say hi to your mom?
Hi, Mom.
So we've got water floating around as water vapor, as a gas. Now, ultimately, to become a cloud, first it has to condense into little teeny tiny water droplets, and then if we get enough of them in a cloud, if there becomes too much water floating around, then we start to form raindrops, and that's what we're going to focus on today. So we get our clouds to form because the air is cooler as it goes up higher in the atmosphere, and the pressure is also lower. So again, here we did this one a few weeks ago. It was one of my favorite experiments. It always looks the best. We've got our water in this bottle. We've got water vapor floating around that we can't see. And what we're going to do to make our cloud is drop the air pressure. So we're only doing one of those steps. What happens in the atmosphere is that air rises higher and higher into the sky, the pressure drops, and it gets colder, so both things work together. So we've got our water, we've got water vapor. Just like in this room, there's water vapor that we can't see floating around in here. So I'm going to pump it up with some air first to get high pressure in there. And the reason this works, I'm actually going to let's go to this table, it's on a little more stable. The reason this works is because we go from high pressure to low pressure really quickly. So let's see, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, let's go 10. So now you can hear it, that pressure is really high in there. And again, what we want to do is condense that water vapor out so it goes from a gas back to liquid, but really small pieces of it. So you ready? 1, 2, 3.
Wow.
Now, this is one of my favorite. It looks like we've got a bottle full of milk in here, but if I pour it out, you can see here, it is water vapor. It's just little teeny tiny drops. It's like fog, or it's literally what's going on in a cloud. As it gets back here into the room, you'll notice it disappears really quickly. So what happens is that water vapor that condensed into liquid starts to evaporate right back into a gas. So it becomes invisible again. And you can see here we're squeezing some of it out of our bottle. So we've got our cloud. We made that. So how does it go from a cloud with all those tiny droplets into an actual raindrop? And that is going to happen. It's all part of the water cycle. So here we have our water cycle, and if you talked about this in school, I know we talked about it a few weeks ago, one of the first steps that I think of, at least first, is evaporation, because that's going on all the time. There's always water that either already has evaporated, floating around in the air, that water vapor. Then it is going to do that next thing that we just did, condense, form some clouds, and then the third one is precipitation. And that happens once there's so much water that has condensed, actual tiny water droplets floating around, that it gets too heavy and they start to fall out of the cloud. And that's where we get our rain. So let's zoom in a little bit closer. I really want to talk about the scale, what's going on inside the cloud. We've got these cloud droplets, so really small, almost a little too tough to see. If we were to measure them on average, cloud droplets can be different sizes, but they are about 0.02 2/100ths of a millimeter wide. And unfortunately, I grabbed a ruler that doesn't have millimeters, but millimeter is going to be, let's say it's about the same as a 1/16 of an inch. It's not too far off. So if we could slice that up 100 times, it would only be 2 of those little slices. That would be about the size of our cloud droplet. Now, when you compare that to a raindrop, the raindrop is massive. We've got 0.02 2/100ths of a millimeter to about 2 millimeters. So this is almost to scale. Honestly, if I made this more to scale, the raindrop would look even bigger. So here are our cloud droplets, those super teeny tiny things, what we just made in that bottle. This would be the size of a raindrop. If our cloud droplet was actually that big, our raindrop would be about that big. So when we think about it, it's about 100 times wider. But when we're talking about a raindrop, it doesn't matter just how wide it is. It's also a three-dimensional thing. It's a sphere. So it's going to be wider, it's going to be taller, it's going to be deeper. So it actually takes about 1 million tiny cloud droplets to make one raindrop. So that gives you an idea of what's going on in the cloud. A whole lot of these have to come together to actually make a raindrop. And what starts to happen is, as there gets to be just too many of these in the cloud, it's too heavy, they just kind of start coming together. They bounce into each other a little bit, and the air is just so saturated that they continue. The bigger ones eat the smaller ones, and next thing you know, you do end up with a raindrop that big. You're smiling. Eats it?
Yeah, they eat the other ones and then...
So what I want to show you here is, of course, we're talking about those cloud droplets turning into rain droplets, but sometimes they don't actually make their way all the way down to the ground. You've probably seen this before. One of our guys at the National Weather Service, Hunter, actually took this picture yesterday, and this is what we call virga. You'd have our cloud up here, it got heavy, we had all these tiny cloud droplets formed into rain, but it started to fall out of the cloud and actually evaporated before getting down to the ground. It really makes like kind of a neat, almost jellyfish sort of look. So this is the official name, is virga, and that's not all rain reaching down to the ground. If it runs into really dry air before it gets down there, it can actually evaporate, and that whole water cycle process starts all over again. So when we do have rain, like we're going to have tonight, and like we'll have across a lot of the East Coast, that is when we've got saturated air, or at least saturated enough all the way down to the surface so those raindrops don't dry up. That happens a lot of the time when we're trying to forecast snow as well. It might be snowing out of the cloud, but sometimes the air is just too dry down at the surface closer to us, so those snowflakes just get gobbled up by the dry air. They just evaporate right back into dry air and into water vapor. So I'm talking about one of the wettest places on Earth. We'll kind of compare a little bit. That happens to be, the record is for a city in India. And that place gets about, I don't know why we're freezing here for me. Let me see. There we go. Get it. Reset. We've got the rainiest place on Earth. I believe it's Cherrapunji, India. That is in the far eastern part of India. Let me see here. Get our globe out. Here we are. Might be a little tough to see, but Colombia, right around down here, anywhere on the East Coast, there's Florida. India, we go all the way over, and it's actually in this far eastern region. You can see here on the map, it is covered in clouds, so they get a ton of rain, but it's going to be about right over there, and more than 1,000 inches of rain per year. If you take that to feet, that is 83 feet of rain. So picture an 8-story building. That's how much rain they get regularly over the course of the year. Now it is, again, one of the wettest places on the planet, and you can see here they get all these waterfalls. It's basically a rainforest type of area. So as far as one of the wettest places, I think that one really takes the cake. When we talk about one of the driest places, the driest continent, you think maybe a desert, but really one of the places that's more like a desert that you don't always think of is actually Antarctica. Over the course of the year, they only get about 6.5 inches of rain, and a lot of that's pretty much falling as snow, but that's it. So it's really kind of a super cold, icy, but really more like a desert type of atmosphere. Now, of course, in the middle of a lot of deserts around the world, they're also not getting very much rain, but I think Antarctica is a really neat kind of place to remember as a really dry one. As far as back closer to home, Colombia here, on average, we get about 45 inches of rain a year. So that, just for comparison, again, we were talking about a place that gets 83 feet of rain in India. For us, we're shy of about 4 feet of rain on average over a year. One of the wettest cities in the country is going to be Mobile, Alabama. They get close to 70 inches of rain over the course of the year. There's a few places in the Pacific Northwest in the mountains that do get even more rain than that, but as far as actual cities where a lot of people live, Mobile takes the cake, Mobile, Alabama, for our area. I want to try and make some of our own rain here real fast.
We do have a question. What is acid rain?
What is acid rain? So when there is a lot of pollution in the air, we talked about this with our cloud on our cloud day as well, there's something called cloud condensation nuclei. And what that means is the little tiny water droplets in a cloud usually need something else to cling onto, something that's even smaller than that cloud droplet. And it might be dust, it might be dirt, it can actually be a piece of an insect, but sometimes it's actually pollution. And then that means those rain droplets just have a little bit more acidity in them. It doesn't mean when we have acid rain that it's falling out of the sky and melting things or it's not going to hurt you. It's just a little bit more acidic than our typical rainfall. And what it will do is over time it can start to decay things and start to eat away at things. I remember when I learned about acid rain when I was little, I thought in my head like, oh my gosh, don't get caught outside in that. It's not that type of acid, but it is something that over time starts to erode away at things even more. Okay, so what I have here, I just realized I forgot something. I left it in the refrigerator. So we'll do this one first. Maybe we'll have a chance to go and grab it. What we have here is just a jar of water, and we are going to just kind of try and make some rain. We can make clouds. We can't really make rain, but this is kind of fun to do at home with the kids. Get my notes out of here. All you need is really just some, you could use a glass. It doesn't have to be as fancy as this, but I just like this because it's nice and wide. Get some nice foam shaving cream, and what we're going to do is make our cloud here on top. Let me see here. And all you're doing, just put in a bunch. And again, this one is more so just for fun, but it is, I think it's a pretty cool little experiment. So now you need some blue food coloring, and we were talking about how our cloud gets a little bit of, it gets more and more water vapor in there, more and more cloud droplets. So what we're going to do is kind of add some more, and ultimately those clouds just get too heavy, and it does start to rain. So I've got my blue food coloring, and I'm just going to start kind of going around my cloud a little bit, adding some of our food coloring, and eventually it gets a little bit, whoops, I think I missed there. It gets a little bit too heavy, and it starts to fall through our cloud, and you'll start to see here, we end up with some rain. Now you can do this way here with the drops, or you can put some directly into some water and maybe make it a little bit more dramatic here. So we're just going to add water right to our cloud, and you should see here, start sinking through. And this is kind of what happens when we have our clouds out in the sky. They're able to hold on for a little while, but eventually there's just too much water in them, and they start to, oops, this stuff is floating a little bit more than I expected it to. If you use an eyedropper, it's even better, but you get the idea here that our clouds eventually just get a little, we're going to end up here with a little too saturated.
Some Virgo.
And then, we do have some Virgo in there. And then eventually it starts to fall out of the bottom. This one is more so just for fun, not super scientific, but, whoops, I'm going to blue hands the rest of the day. But if you have your food coloring as you drop it in, that's really the best way. You kind of get to be a little bit more precise about it. And you can see as it, whoops, sinks right down in and eventually drops down into making our rainforest. So, whoops.
Very cool.
Be careful. Maybe some rubber gloves, or at least be ready to wipe it off right
What's
away.
in the fridge? Do you want me to?
If you can, it's mineral oil. So you see, it should be right in the front. How's our frame there? Because I'll go through a couple more graphics, but
If you bend down.
Okay, I can go a little bit lower. All right, so I'm gonna move that over. Thank you, Sam. And what we have here, we'll get this one ready for the next little experiment. So we have let me make sure, see how we're framed up. So we've got our rainfall across the area. Let's talk a little bit of safety here really quickly. When we talk about rain, the weather safety aspect, of course, is going to be the chance for flooding. So what we have out there, the things that we need to be most mindful of when we talk flooding is going to be flash flooding as well as what we call aerial flooding. And that just means that we could see, I might have to pause this here for us. We've got flooding when we just talk about water overflowing. Oh man, here, let me stop this for just 1 second. I didn't realize we had sound effects on this one.
Wow. This cloud is so cool.
All right, sorry about that. So when we talk about flooding versus flash flooding, because you'll hear weather people talk about these two things, the biggest difference is that flash flooding is something that happens really quickly, and it doesn't usually last for that long. Flooding is something that can go on for weeks at a time. So when we talk about flooding, we don't say the word flash. That's generally water coming out of a stream or a riverbank or something that usually has water in it, but it is basically overflowing onto places that are usually dry. Or it could just be a lot of ponding, a lot of water that kind of comes together in one place where close to where it fell that's also typically dry. It's usually a slower process, and it can be a more long-lived and a wider area. We talk about flash flooding, we're talking about excessive rainfall or a ton of rainfall in just a short period of time. And what that does is overwhelm creeks and rivers. It can overwhelm the street. So normally that water works its way down into the sewer through the storm drains, but sometimes what they call here, the official definition is raging torrents that rip through riverbed, streets, and canyons. So that's the big difference. Flash flooding kind of sneaks up on you. It can happen a lot faster. So some tips for you when we do talk about flooding is going to be to make sure the biggest thing, anytime you're with your parents and there's a flooded roadway, find another way to go. Don't try to drive through floodwaters. If this is happening close to your house, you want to make sure you get to higher ground. And when we talk about cars, just 1 foot of water is enough to float a vehicle, and 2 feet of water can pick up most vehicles and take it wherever it wants to go. So just don't drive.
Which is
around
very
barricades.
dangerous.
Exactly. When we talk about people getting hurt or people even dying in flooding, most often it's because they were in the car and tried to go through water that really they never should have. The other thing that happens is sometimes we can't see that the roadway has been washed out, but it has, and then you can end up in a really dangerous situation as well. So, all right, let me get back to this one here. This was kind of a neat thing I had never seen before. I'm gonna need, sorry Sam, one more thing I left over here.
I was going to get you one of these for your hand.
Oh, thank you. So this is another, I'd never seen this experiment before, so this one was kind of cool. Thank you. A new one to try, and you can do this with any sort of oil, vegetable oil, but the problem with vegetable oil is it's pretty yellow, so I wanted to use something that was a little bit clear. So this is mineral oil, and what I did, the reason I put it in the fridge is because I wanted it to be a little bit colder than the water in here. I want it to be a little bit denser. So what we have is some oil, mineral oil, whatever you want to use.
People cook with that?
I don't think so. People use mineral oil for cutting boards and things like that.
Oh,
And it's also,
like polishing?
yes, you can use it for that.
Gotcha.
So here we have our mineral oil, and what we're going to do is put some blue food coloring into this. Now you'll notice it doesn't do what it did in the water, right? It kind of stays together, but I want to put quite a few drops in here. So it stays in these little pieces. Looks like we're going to need some more food coloring. So what we're going to do now is inside our jar, and you can do this just with a fork or spoon, mix it up, but what I want to do is do it in this jar so I can shake it up really well. And you'll notice now they're starting to turn into a lot more little pieces. Now, what will happen, because oil and water aren't going to mix, we're able to take all these little basically drops of food coloring, the blue in there, that are staying separated. They're kind of staying off doing their own thing, but they're all broken up into these little pieces. And now what we can do is take that and dump it on top of our water. Now, I didn't actually test this with cold water, so I hope it works, but what you'll see here is the oil and the water don't mix. It stays up top, but what will eventually happen is little bits of that food coloring are going to start to break free from the oil. I might get a paper towel to put behind us. And you should see here, it happens kind of slowly, but you'll see we kind of start to get
Wow.
What's neat about this one is it happens kind of the same way it does in the cloud. A lot of times we end up with really light rain at first, just a little bit of drizzle. As a few raindrops start to get away, but then ultimately, as this goes on, we'll kind of let it go as we move on to making our rain gauge, and then you start to see a whole lot that starts coming out of that oil all at once. Or for us, we're kind of thinking of it as out of our cloud.
So the cloud's getting heavier and heavier and heavier. And
yeah, and eventually, so what's happening here is as those little droplets of food coloring in the oil get down to the water, they actually are able to kind of separate out of the oil and then dissolve down into the water. So that's why we're able to get this effect and make this work. If you guys do this one at home, it looks really cool. You'll see videos of it online. If you can set up a phone or something and do a time-lapse video, then you can kind of see how it really looks and as it happens a little bit more quickly. But I'll let that go for you. You can kind of get a sense for that rain coming out. Rain is one of the trickier things to make. I can make a pretty good cloud, but these are fun to try, but just maybe not quite as impressive as making the cloud, but you get the idea here. Kind of a neat one. Let's do. Last thing I want to do, especially with all this heavy rain on the way, is make a rain gauge. So that's how we measure the rain. Now, when we talk about flooding and things like that, it's really important to know how heavily or how quickly the rain is coming down. But this time, we're just going to focus on measuring it. And I wanted to do it, yeah, I think we're going to have blue hands for the news. We're going to do it with some things that maybe you already have at home. And the biggest and probably most important thing is you need some sort of bottle to do this. I'm just going to set this. Here, Sam, I'll set this over there with yours.
Yeah, I wanted to do that.
There we go. See if we're able to get a cool little video of that. But you need a 2-liter bottle. You're going to need a ruler, some tape, and a marker. Those are probably your most important things. And what we're going to do first is just cut off the top and scissors. Cut off the top of the bottle. Just to get this started, make it a little bit easier for me, I'm going to use I thought it would be easier. I guess I've been using my razor blade a little bit. But start, maybe you can get mom and dad to help you do that. But then really you can just use scissors, and we're just going to cut around the top of the bottle. Now what we're trying to do here is make a funnel for our rain gauge so that we're able to have our rain stay in there. So we've got our funnel cut off. We've got this that's going to go back inside. But first, before we do that, I want to put in some rocks. You just need something that you can weigh down your rain gauge with. It doesn't have to be rocks, but rocks are free. Found those outside, but you could use marbles, you could use pennies, sand. You don't want a ton in there, but you just want...
So the wind doesn't blow it over.
Exactly, especially on a night like tonight where we're going to get some heavy rain, but it's going to be windy as well. So then, put that back in there, and you're going to take your tape and just tape around the top of it. And the reason for that is mostly just because it ends up a little bit sharp on the top side, and we want our funnel to stay in one place. But this way, you're just not going to get yourself cut by the plastic at all.
I don't know if it's the mineral or the shaving cream, but it smells good.
So, and of course, I didn't cut mine very straight, but the straighter you do, the better that will look. Now what we're going to do here is put another piece of tape, just kind of going right up the side. And I'm going to do it over here. Now the trick with a rain gauge like this, because we have these rocks in the bottom, we don't want to measure the water all the way from the bottom, and you'll notice the shape on the bottom would mess us up too. So what we actually need to do, and it would have been helpful if I saved some clear water, and I did not.
How much?
Yeah, not quite enough.
I can go fill it up.
That's okay. You know what?
Oh, I have my water bottle.
I'm just going to use the blue. Oh no, we got that going on.
Well, I have my water bottle.
Oh, okay, perfect.
It has ice in it though. But
Sorry guys, I got
water out.
forgot one of my steps. Oh, awesome! Thank you, Sam.
Just wash the ice.
Get your thing blue. So you're just gonna pour in water to the point where, whoops, well, we'll have a little bit of ice in there. I'll get you some new water. I promise.
It's okay.
Till we're up above the rocks. So obviously if you put in more rocks, then you end up needing more water.
Oops.
And then, so each time that you would want to use this rain gauge, you'd already have to have water in it to get started. So that's the only thing that makes it a little bit more of a process. But when you know rain's coming, you can just go out and make sure it's ready to go. So we've got our blue tape on here, we've got water in here covering up to the rocks, and now what we want to do is mark on here our 0 point. So we're going to do our 0 right where we have our water at this point right now. So right on here, 0. And what we're going to do is just take our ruler and we're going to mark up a few more spots to get some inches on there. So we'll go to 1 inch, we'll go to 2 inches, 3 inches, and this would be a lot of rain. Hopefully we don't see this much tonight. And then just kind of go on and you can mark how much that is. Now again, it's really important that you start with your 0 that's actually going to be above where the rocks are, and you have to have some water in there ready to go. If you started with this empty, the rain would come down and have to fill in here first, so we would miss a lot of the measurement. But ultimately what will happen now tonight, the reason we like this funnel is because the rain will be able to drop in, and then it's not likely to bounce back out. It's going to go in and fill in, and we'll be able to measure tomorrow morning to see how much rain actually came down. Now, of course, you can make yours a lot nicer looking than I did. I did mine pretty quickly here, but it's a really easy little project you can do, and especially for a night like tonight, get a good idea for how much rain came down where you live. And if you do this, please let me know what you wake up tomorrow morning, how much rain actually showed up where you are. We do have the chance for some really heavy rain across parts of the area tonight, at least in South Carolina. So it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out. I'm going to take this home, and I'm going to make sure I put it on the deck so we can see what falls where I live. So we've got a few different things you can try. This one is pretty straightforward, pretty easy. This one is fun too. If you do a thinner cloud, not quite as much shaving cream, it makes it a little bit easier. You don't have to use or waste quite as much food coloring.
See all of our...
And then over there in the oil, you can see what's happening more and more as more of those blue little specks of blue dye sink down farther and farther into the water. And then you can see here it's happening. So just some fun little things to try. When we talk about rain, and again, the biggest safety stuff is when you've got flood warnings, especially on the road, make sure your parents or anybody for that matter are not trying to drive through flooded roadways. Any questions? Anything come up?
Just saying thank you.
Cool.
And someone asked if you could use shaving cream for that one, but...
Not quite the same effect, and you can try with a different...
Because you want the oil to...
Yeah, the foam shaving cream definitely works the best, but you might be able to get it away with something that's a little bit more of a gel. It just won't look as much like a cloud. You can have some more fun with it too. Use lots of different colors on your food coloring. You don't have to use blue. I just thought that made the most sense. And that actually looks kind of neat with the one with the oil. If you use red, blue, and yellow...
And here's the time lapse, if you can see the rain falling through. Kind of sped up.
Go. Yeah, no, it definitely helps to speed it up. So nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, so thank you guys for watching. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. We're probably going to talk about either snow or winter weather or hurricanes. So kind of want to see what you guys think. Let me know in the comments which one you'd rather hear about as we get closer to hurricane season. Maybe we'll hold off on that one until June 1st for the beginning of hurricane season. We've got a lot more topics to cover, and hopefully we'll come up with some more fun projects for you guys to do. Have a good rest of the day, and make sure those storms move through tonight. Mom, Dad, that you are ready. You've got the phone nearby just in case we do get any warnings. Not expecting severe weather for a lot of us, but a few severe storms are possible overnight tonight, so just want to be ready for that. Thanks, guys.